Come on. Bam.
What's up, everybody? This is Raul Vega, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Yes.
Raul Vega is a creator and someone who has been on the show several times. The things that he creates tend to be musical in nature. He's a composer by training and by trade, but a creator in many other digital facets and a multimedia artist. That's how I would describe you, simply because it's been a while since we've talked, Raul, and who knows what you could have been up to since the last time we talked to you. It could be anything.
Yeah, it's really good to see you guys again, man. You guys, I always bring this up every single time. You guys were the very first interview I had ever done back in 2015, 2016, something like that.
Wow. And where'd we do it?
We did it at Jay Moore's balcony at his apartment in, what was it? I think it was it in the Marina or in Redondo Beach or something? Like
yeah, it was Marina Del Rey. Yeah. And who owns that apartment?
It was Jay Moore, wasn't it?
No, Jeannie Buss, his wife.
Oh, okay, all right.
That was they weren't yet married, but she has properties all over the place. One of the remarkable things about that property, though, I remember, because that was my first time visiting that place, as when you came there. Yeah. And I was like, man, this place is really like, this 14-foot ceilings.
Yeah.
And this is a 1-story apartment with 14-foot ceilings. This is pretty big. Everything here is grand. And he mentioned that, she owns those properties because she gets basketball players from, like she might draft somebody from Europe. That's and right. They come to town to play basketball, and she's got to put them up and make them comfortable. And these guys are all 7 feet tall. Yeah. So she can't put them in a studio apartment on Centinela.
Yeah, they got to clear this. All I remember is I felt like an asshole because I brought over like a 12-pack of beer thinking I'm going to spread the love. And then I walk in and I was like, Jay, do you want? He's like, I'm actually sober. And I was like, oh, shit. I probably shouldn't have brought this beer. Yeah, you guys weren't.
So, yeah, it was good. You've done a lot since then. I think the reason that we had you on initially is because you are, originally from what is my current hometown of Benicia, California, and it's where Pete grew up. And you had a podcast back then that created quite a stir called Rose Drive, which was a fictional drama mystery that took place in, and you made geographical references to where you grew up. So it wasn't about the town specifically, but it was kind of neat to listen to if you're from the town. It just gave it an added dynamic on top of the great writing that you did. And because of the stir that you caused with this podcast, we thought, man, this guy is really doing great things. And then we found out along the way that you also had a pretty fantastic day job creating sounds for Hans Zimmer that he used in enormous movies, in which we were always excited to see you in the titles.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been it's been one long road, starting from Rose Drive and then expanding to other podcast adventures, and and then even with Hans now, I've been with him for about 12 years now, which is kind of crazy. I've been making some noise with him for over a decade, and it's been a lot of fun. So a lot of growth, a lot of opportunities to kind of challenge myself and like just try to expand my own mindset of what it means to be a storyteller. I think ultimately that's where I decided that's what I feel the most comfortable calling myself, regardless of like whether it's writer or musician or composer or sound designer. I love to tell stories in any way that I can, and it's been a hell of a ride, but you can't shut me up yet. I still got too much to say.
and you've learned more and more ways to say it.
Yeah, I'm trying, man. I'm trying my best to. Yeah.
I was in Burbank yesterday doing a show with an auction house that auctions off, all kinds of things that are amazing. A set of Bruce Lee nunchucks, never before at an auction before, and so all of these movie places have all this stuff that comes with when they make it, scripts, scripts, later edition scripts with lipstick on them and fake blood from, being on the set and everything. But that stuff is shrinking as the movie making process gets more digital, which got me thinking about like what you do with Hans. And someday, is someone going to auction off his Adobe Premiere, or whatever account it is, right? Like his password, and you can buy all of Hans Zimmer's sounds from, back in the 2000s. And maybe, like if you're going to have to buy something, why wouldn't you want to buy, part of that workshop or something? What are your thoughts about like when we make movies and there's less real stuff and it's more digital?
Mm-hmm.
What's going to be consumable in the future, you think?
Whew. What's interesting is that even just within my job itself, within these last 12 years, it has changed drastically. Like the idea and the goal is pretty much always the same. We always want to create a brand new color palette for whatever movie we're working on. So just so I can kind of explain my job to anybody who's watching and kind of want to understand what it is. I kind of go by many titles. It just seems to change depending on what movie we're working on. But working with film composer Hans Zimmer, I am one of two people who crafts individual digital versions of instruments that he can then use to write with on his keyboard and put in the film. So an easy way I like to describe it is if you look at the composer, in this case Hans, as a painter, and his sequencer, he uses Cubase. That's where he writes his music. If that's his canvas and he's the painter, I'm the one that goes and gets the paint for him. Very specific sound source. So he may be like, hey, we've got this project coming up. I want to paint this beautiful lake with rivers and trees and all that. And there's a very specific green I'm looking for. This is where we can start sourcing it. Can you get those greens for me? And also maybe figure out some own shades of your own that we can throw in there. That's kind of like the easiest way I could kind of describe it. So it's just building an arsenal of sounds that he can use at his leisure. And it's never as a means to replace the musician or the artist. It's rather to take their sounds, digitize them so that we can really shred them and manipulate them in the computer in a way that we would be killing our musician if we did it in real life, like forcing them to do some really crazy sounds. But all to say, it used to start with, okay, let's record these violins, let's record these drum kits, let's record all these very orchestral Western European sounds and try to replicate what they do in the orchestra. And now, I mean, since then, we've always weaved in our own sound design aspects to it, but we've gotten a lot more sound design heavy. I mean, the whole purpose of Dune Part 1 and Part 2 was because this takes place on a completely different planet in space. We didn't want, or Hans specifically didn't want any of the sounds to be something that you can find here on Earth. And the only thing that he wanted that would have survived many centuries into the future would be the human voice. So beyond that, everything else was created brand new instruments, new textures, new sounds, both through sound design. And then also some of our musicians ourselves are incredible welders and master creators where they go beyond just playing their flutes or their cello and actually create new sounds with these instruments or new instruments themselves. So it's funny because John and I were just talking about that, about, the artistry between the different generations and living from a complete analog space to now we're living in a digital space. I'm kind of the generation that's caught in between both. Growing up, I learned of the analog stuff. And just as I was getting comfortable with it, boom, the digital era comes in. Right. And I've seen that at the studio, too. I'm 37 now. And we got these cats that are coming in early 20s and they understand the technology in a way that none of us do because that's their world. That's their language. We're like kind of having to catch up. And then you got people a couple of generations ahead who are, trying to catch up as well. So I think a lot of it has to do with, the more we can kind of learn and accept where we're at right now with technology and with the tools. I always want to make sure we use that tool because that word tools, right? Before we even start going on to the 4-hour conversation about artificial intelligence, my whole thought is like, think of it as a tool, right? The more we can learn to use this tool, you still need the human to be able to replicate and to create the emotion that goes behind it. And again, perfect example is my job too. Like we use a program called RX made by this company Isotope. And it's an amazing audio cleanup tool where you can clean up background noise, hiss, hums, pops from P's and pop filters, and I mean everything. It does a lot of cool stuff. And when I was using it for Interstellar back in 2014, they had RX2, I think. And it was a good tool, but computers weren't as fast. It took forever to just clean up the audio, all that stuff, right? You had to really, really pay attention to what you were doing. Now they're up to RX11, and you could basically put the thing in and say, hey, with this AI module that's built into it, can you scan all the components in here and do your best to make it sound like this reference audio? And it'll do it to a degree. So, it's interesting, especially with my job. I might be putting myself out of a job by using the tools that it used to take me hours to do. And I'm like, wow, but at the same time, now I can use that time doing other things, for him, and coming up with new sounds and new kind of ideas. So,
one of the names for the next generation following yours is the digital natives. I don't know why we keep saying Gen Z, because digital natives really, as you described, that's exactly right. My daughter was very into the millennial. She's a cusp, so maybe she's part digital native, but she could work a mouse and type her name before she could do almost anything else in an academic way, And so they just it's innate almost now and she's born in 97. So, now think about 20 years later, and it's just ubiquitous for them and how they think about things. So I don't want to get distracted by the digital natives, but there is this. When I went to Bosnia, it was the beginning of the digital age in intelligence, and we could pull out hard drives and walk them down the road, and we could take a laptop and we could print in the field. These were gigantic leaps from a pen or a typewriter, And so now, 30 years later, we're talking about all this other stuff where you may work yourself out of it, or you'll have to find other things to do to keep your job, because there is so much digital help.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Yeah, it's wild.
Here's an old man story. My cousin Daryl and I operated a studio that he owned, and one of the things that came out of that was, we had a very deep and intimate knowledge of the MPC 60, and that puts a timestamp on it. Well, a couple years later had gone by, and we had moved into other things, and then eventually we thought, we ought to get an MPC 60 again. This was years later. And so we decided to buy one, and we found one that was great, in immaculate condition. Actually, it was MPC 3000, so it moved up. But when we got it, we got all excited because it came with a library of floppy disks. And you remember those things took floppy disks.
Oh, yeah.
And we found out that library of floppy disks contained all of Bob Rock's drum sound library.
Wow.
And we thought, we had the same reaction. Wow, this is a treasure trove. Well, of course, we ended up using exactly none of those sounds for anything, because they were his sounds.
Yeah.
So, but it speaks to the condition of, creativity, where you are bringing a guy like Hans Zimmer, who is noted for, having such ability as a composer to put music to anything film. And still he demands that what it calls for from him is for you to go out and create him a new palette of colors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think what's kind of cool about that studio is that, he didn't come from a formal education of music. I mean, I think he got kicked out of every music school he went to, because not in a rebellious, fuck you kind of way, but really because he just had all these ideas, and he just was so always playing and always experimenting with sounds. And he learned the orchestra, obviously, growing up in Germany and then London. I mean, it's weaved into that, but we've talked about it, and the technology and synthesizers and all. So a lot of people forget he was the synthesizer for the Buggles, and he was in the very first music video. Video Killed the Radio Star. You can see him jamming out on his keys. But finding this really cool way of still blending that with musicians, and I think what's kind of crazy is that film music, as much as it doesn't have the highest regard in the scope from the academic standpoint. I can speak for that truly, having gone to music school, and every time you mention something about film music, there's always a little bit of a elitism to it. Yeah, it's just like, and I'm like, you realize film composers, even now, are keeping musicians fed. I mean, you look at Michael Giacchino, John Williams, any of these cats who are fully writing orchestral scores still to this day. I mean, Family Guy was one of the last shows that had a regular orchestra every single week. The Simpsons as well, that puts food on the table. That keeps these live musicians and instrumentalists, going. And I think that's what's really kind of cool is while we do still have all these synthesizers and these samples, what I make, it's never meant to replace a live organic human being, and it never does. Every musician that we record to sample, we always bring them back and they always play live over themselves. So I just think that's actually really kind of cool. In fact, there's a new project coming out. It's already in theaters right now called Blitz. It's a World War II movie that we worked on. It's already out in theaters. It comes out on Apple TV on the 22nd, Apple TV Plus. And it's the score's out. You can listen to it. It's all orchestral, and I got to play. You guys remember the recorder flute that we everybody forced to play? Yeah, I got to mess around on that, but we actually turned it on its head, and instead of making it sound, well, it never really sounds nice, but we turned it basically into this like horror score of sorts, and like shredded it up, and I did all these throat purrs and all these crazy little ping-pongy flammy sounds. We were drowning it in these bottles of water to get more pitches out of it. But then there were also live musicians. So as you listen to the score, and it's human, the complete opposite of the approach for Dune or for Twilight of the Gods, for example. So I like I said, I think it is a matter of working with working with the technology and embracing it and encouraging it in a lot of ways. But you can still tell. I mean, you can still tell when something's completely computer made and something isn't. You can feel it. I think even to the person who doesn't have the eye or the ear for any of it, there's still something inherently cold about it that you just wasn't made by a human.
I was going to ask, because I love watching old episodes of Flipper on the internet. You can watch everything, and they have harps, orchestra, choir, and it makes me turn my head when they pop the music on, and it's distinct for each episode. Look, they have some pieces that repeat, but I'm telling you, like, you can tell. Can you fool me? Yes, but there's something about a chorus. There's something about three people playing harp. That is very hard to come across with that warmth. What is that? I mean, I'm watching it over to the TV 60 something years later, through a digital device, right? But why does it snap your head when you hear it and you go, oh my God, there's actually people in the studio singing that chorus line?
Well, because, and I say this with the highest respect, I mean this in the most positive light, there's the element of human error that we all need and we love, right? I mean, even my job as a sampling engineer, I'm asking you as a musician, I joke with people that I'm like Ursula asking you to sign away your voice, like, give me your voice, but I'm asking you to recreate a performance, an emotional performance, fragment by fragment, section by section, sound by sound, volume by volume. And when I do that, yes, I have it all laid out. It's pretty, it's beautiful, but it's too pretty. It's too beautiful. It's too clean, because we need to make sure that when we're working with them, that they are very clean. We want to make sure everything's pitched correctly. We want to make sure everything's the right length. But when you're actually playing something in real life, part of the fun and magic of it is that it's not, you're going to get all these happy accidents that kind of happen with it. But I think something that we end up doing quite well at our studio is not just with our composers, but specifically with our mixing engineers. They have such incredible tools, and even just like all of our mixers, Seth Waldman, Alan Meyerson, Eva Reisted. I mean, all these cats who have worked with Hans in the past or who will continue to work with him. They're such emotional artists, and that's how they mix, from their heart. And so they have this incredible way of putting life kind of back into these frozen performances that have been captured in time. And I don't know how the hell they do it, but they do it. And it's a feeling, you know? And so I think, Pete, what you were saying, like, I really do think that's kind of what it comes down to is, if something's too clean, you can, something inside you can tell, like, there needs to be a little bit of dirt on that, you know? And so I think, you know, in the 80s and 90s, it was very tricky to make samples sound realistic. So they kind of existed in the way that they did. And now we're in such a weird space. Exactly. You said, I mean, there's times I'm hearing some of these demos and I'm like, oh, that's a live orchestra. And then I look at the sequence, I'm like, oh no, those are sounds that I recorded years ago. Like, how are they doing this, you know?
Yeah.
But again, I think it may be one of those kind of emotionally, like those emotional things that you can't really put into words. You just feel, and you know that it's a human. And I think that's kind of where that real connection starts. And that's why we can never really, and we should never stop with people actually creating art, you know?
You said some dirt on it. That's going to be John talking. Sorry, I was trying to do a joke, and John jumped on top of my joke.
No, I'm not stomping on your joke. Go.
I was going to say, if you're talking about something having some dirt on it, we need to bring John into the conversation.
He got on it, man. He knew it.
No, you know what I was going to say? I was going to say two things. Where it becomes apparent, I think, or one way that it, I think, becomes relatable is if you hear, let's say, a horn part that's played on a keyboard in a live setting. You're hearing a guy with a single hand play notes that are triggered by a keyboard. And typically it's the same note sample, just pitched differently based on what key he presses down. Whereas if you hear five guys play a part as a horn section, you know, the trumpet player maybe has a little more spit floating around in his horn. And the trombone player is, you know, pitchy in a little different way. And they may be pros and it may be so minute, but there are just these subtle differences that sit in the part that you can't replicate when you have synthesized, no matter how well you have synthesized it.
Yeah.
And I remember we did an episode with Leslie Ann Jones, and she is a recording engineer, legendary recording engineer. We did her episode at Skywalker
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, Hall of Fame. Skywalker Ranch, which is the studio that she runs. And she showed us the modular nature of the live room in this place, which is the size of a basketball gymnasium. And they have partitions where they can create a different size room within this large room. And I thought, man, this is great. And I know some people who have recorded in here, and it's, you know, legendary place. But I asked her, how often do you guys blow this thing out and open all the partitions and use the full room? And she said, all the time. And it was so nice to hear that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Anyway,
let's talk about projects. Let's talk about what you're working on that is exciting you. I mean, obviously anything with Hans is exciting, but I want to say this. I'm going to back up a little bit. I was at the Hollywood Bowl the other night. You know how incredible that place is. I know John does. We saw Chappelle there together and blew our minds.
Oh, cool.
But Danny Elfman was there.
Musical guest was D'Angelo.
Oh, that's sexy.
Yeah, it was. I got a boner. John had a boner.
I'm sweating just thinking about that. You got D up there?
God, it was just great. Anyway,
it was great. Danny Elfman was the thing, and he's playing his modern music. He's playing Oingo Boingo, and he's also weaving in his orchestral stuff from different movies. Even if you don't even know the movie, like for example, Mars Attacks. I don't know that movie at all. And so my special someone is next to me, and that took a stab at what the movie was, and I'm like, no, that's Mars Attacks. I don't even know how these words are coming out of my mouth because I don't know this specific piece in this specific movie that I have maybe seen once. I don't think I've ever actually seen the full movie. That blew me away. And I know the same thing would happen if I saw John Williams, who always plays at the Bowl, thank goodness. But also, if Hans was to play there, I'd be like, oh, that's from Spider-Man 4, which I've never seen, you know, but I would just know it because it's stuck in there somehow. It's incredible. So let's talk about what excites you.
Yeah. Well, to kind of bounce off that, I'm sure you guys are aware, but for the last several years, Hans has been doing a tour around the world with his band, which are a lot of my colleagues that are in it, playing his music to live audiences all around Europe, all around the world. Really, he did a U.S. tour 2017. In the next several years, he did it all over Europe. And this last year, between September and end of October, a couple months, it was the first time he came back to the States, and he played in LA a couple times, Vegas, San Francisco, New York, everywhere. And it's not a sit down orchestra type of thing. It's a rock band. There's aerial dancing, there's lighting. I think for the first run of the tour, I don't know if they're still doing this now, but I believe they had the guy who did all the lighting for Pink Floyd years ago come back and kind of design all this. So it's really an incredible immersive show. I was visiting my cousin up in Seattle in early October, and it just happened to be around the time that they were playing live. And so I asked my studio manager, I'm like, hey, can you get me a handful of tickets so I can bring my friends and my cousin? She's like, yeah. She got us tickets. We go inside. We're like 9th row from the center, like right there, over at the Climate Pledge Arena, which holds over 18,000 people. And I got to tell you guys, this place was filled to at least 16,000 people. Like every seat was filled. I think Casey Musgraves, the huge country artist, was playing there like a week before. My buddy was telling me, he's like, it wasn't this packed for her. So everybody came to see Hans Zimmer live. And I'm looking around, watching my friends, watching my colleagues perform all this music, some of it from stuff I wasn't involved in, but definitely plenty of it that I had worked on, and some of the sounds that I created were used in that show, right? Just kind of fill out the scores. And while nobody was like, singing the lyrics, because there weren't really lyrics, not until The Lion King comes on, I'm looking around, and I brought 6 people, a handful of them that are like 2 of them who are really big fans of Hans, a friend who, knows his work from the big movies, and then my cousin who never watches movies and is used to going to like EDM concerts and stuff. And when I tell you they were all emotionally impacted in the same way, I mean, it was incredible. Like, for them to experience film music, but in a context and that's so emotional, so raw, detached from the film. And what's great is he doesn't play the visuals. It's there for the music and the musicians. So you don't have to kind of watch, be like, oh, they do that at the ball, which is cool, right? They'll have like Harry Potter and John Williams will come out and conduct to the screen, and Danny will do the same thing, and that's great. But this was really more about just come in and enjoy the musicianship of it. And one of the cool things, just before intermission, he comes out and he starts talking to everybody, and he catches me and he sees me and he points to me, and he gives me a huge shout out to the whole arena. And he was like, Raul, he's like, oh, we have family here. This is so great. Like, it was really, really kind of a cool moment. But what was the coolest thing about that was we work so hard on these projects. Okay. And when we're done with the project, we don't have like a let's wrap, let's go celebrate, let's party, because the projects are kind of never done. And by the time we're done with one, we're already in the middle of 2 or 3 others. So we don't have this big moment of like, we're done, let's go out and party and celebrate. We're already working on the next 12 projects. So nobody really gets to experience it outside of, we're always in our studio. And when people talk about it, they're like, oh yeah, I loved the score for Dune or Top Gun or whatever in the theater, and I listen to it when I'm working out, especially with Gen Z. They are huge into Interstellar. I don't know how it's just become like a big thing for them, which is great. But it's very different when you actually get to share that experience and see how people are emotionally responding while it's happening, and I talked to a lot of people because after he pointed me out, like everybody in my row turned around and they're like, who the hell are you? And I was like, that's my team. I work with them. I mean, so it sounds, but it was really just like, it was one of those moments that will forever just like lay in my heart, because one, I could see how much fun he was having. I could see all my friends up there just having a good time. We went backstage and talked to them after, but you never get to really see that because, when you're busy making the music and then it's out there and you're moving on to the next thing. So, yeah, as of recent, that was probably like my most heartfelt like experience, just to kind of like experience it quite literally from a fan's perspective and with the sea of people who are there just because they love the music so damn much, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's amazing to hear you tell that, man, because, and I'm so glad that you shared that with us, because we don't, you know, like as a gigging musician who gets real-time feedback in a live environment, that the notion that you would make those creations and then just walk away from them without any idea for, you know, what the success you created is kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah. It's very humbling, but just really cool. Just kind of like you said, yeah, getting that reaction in real time, you know? But yeah, man, I mean, it's just nice when it can kind of, you get to see it. And again, it's not about me or even him. It's just like we create this music and these stories, and it's affecting everybody differently. And to be in that space to see how it's affecting everybody, I don't know, there's something really special about that. So it's pretty cool.
I don't know if I've ever asked you this, Raul, but you know, since we just lost Quincy Jones, I really reflected on parts of his career. And one of the things that I never really appreciated from his career was that he was a trumpet player, and that, you know, when you look at the content and stuff, he was an arranger, and a lot of what he did, he saw from the point of view of the trumpet.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really gave that much thought. Do you have a native instrument?
Yeah, my instrument is the piano. You know, that's
Okay.
where I kind of learned. I found it when I was 16. And just real quick about Quincy Jones, I mean, you're right. I mean, shout out. That's such a, and the thing is, a lot of people kind of associate him with, especially for me, with like Michael Jackson or just, you know, soul and pop and R&B. Man was a brilliant composer.
Mhm.
He studied with Nadia Boulanger, who's this French like revolutionary composer and instructor and mentor. um I think back in the 50s or 60s or something like that, when he was with her. You know, and you think about it, you think so much about how, I mean, I grew up with a lot of like 60s and 70s soul music in my house. It was always like the Delphonics, the Shylights, the Stylistics, you know,
Yeah.
not just the Temptations, you know, um Teddy P, the Spinners, you know, all these cats. And they have these beautiful underscores of orchestral stuff beneath it to support it.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't realize, like, Quincy Jones was one of the ones who innovated that, you know, and made that part of the culture, you know, of Black pop music back then, and gave it this beautiful spirit to it that you're not getting, you know, and this isn't declining things, but you're not getting that in rock and roll. You're not getting that at that time, you know. So, or like even like in disco, right? You got those disco string stabs that are near, you know, those things like that.
Yeah.
So but yeah, I mean, it was incredible. Lost one of my friends, she's a re-recording mixer, and she actually did all the sound editing for his documentary that came out a few years ago on Netflix.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I have another
Which
friend,
was great.
was great. It was great. But yeah, so musically, yeah, my foundation was the piano. I started playing it way late in life. I think I was like 14 or 15. You know, we always had music in the house, but nobody was a musical person. So I kind of found that on my own, which I'm really grateful for, because I feel like had I been forced to learn it when I was a kid, I wouldn't have had the appreciation for it and the drive for it as I do now.
Yeah.
But the piano is always going to be my home. I mean, that's where I used to write all my music. It's at the keyboard. And you know, double majored when I was at Cal State Long Beach, Bob Cole Conservatory. I was between piano and then music composition. So yeah, and now, you know, I really don't play that much anymore. I'll fiddle around every once in a while, but music kind of holds a very different space in my head now over the years as it's become my full-time profession.
Mhm.
And it's almost more spiritual to me in a way than it is something that I need to physically act out, I guess you'd say. But yeah, that's always going to be my home, is playing the keys, man.
Yeah. Well, you
It.
know, I would liken it to somebody who has become, let's say, like a renowned orator, and was maybe a literature major.
Right.
And, you know, the language of literature is the one through which you speak. It doesn't mean that you continue to study literature in a calculated or, academic way
Right.
to this day, but it definitely informs the point of view that, from which you communicate.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
Piano is, that's the instrument though that takes everything into consideration. I mean, you're operating with the entire range of of notes, and you're also capable of understanding chord structure in ways that other instrumentalists probably spend less time on. Is that accurate? I don't know. I'm a drunk.
Well, no, I mean, that's kind of the thing too, right? Like the piano, people call it a string instrument. They call it a percussion instrument. I mean, it can be so many things. And it's a great tool. It's a great tool for us, especially when we're writing music, to have exactly what you said, John, like the layout, all 88 keys, you can assign everything where you need to. But ultimately, as expressive as one can be with the piano, it really doesn't even hold a candle to a violin or a guitar or a flute or, like a woodwind, something where you physically are really controlling, or singing, right? Or drums even, right? I mean, God, how many dynamics can you get out of drums? It's endless. It is endless. But we have to find a way to kind of like we said before, bring that life into it. But yeah, I mean, I love it. I think there's a reason why it is kind of the main focus for a lot of composers. I mean, so many composers who come, I mean, Hans is a guitarist, but he had to learn the keys so that he could play in the band and all that other stuff, like I know a lot of composers come from very different mediums, but the keyboard just gives them that accessibility to like the whole instrument family. Yeah.
Quincy, one of the things I learned in that documentary was that Quincy's ability to create a score with a pencil and paper.
Yeah.
If I said, "Hey man, here's my film short," and I can't give you any instruments, I got to lock you in this room with a pencil and a piece of paper. How far could you get?
I mean, how many years do we have for me to write the score? Because that would look, the person who's still doing that is John Williams. I mean, that man writes. He's at his piano and he takes his pencil, his manuscripts, and he writes it out. And he's John Williams. And like you're never gonna get anybody that could ever try to replicate his sound. I'm sure he knows the technology enough. He knows how to fiddle with it and all that stuff, but that's not his thing. He's a physical person. He likes to write stuff down. Now it's tricky, like, again, especially when you're working with people who grew up kind of in the digital age. It's now, it's TikTok. It's 6 seconds. We need to have it. Oh, you have this idea for a music cue? Great. I'm going to give you half a day and want you to write a 10-minute orchestral suite for it. Whereas back in the day, you have like Ennio, playing, on the key, Ennio Morricone, who's like, here, let me play for you this tune on the piano. Now imagine the violins here, imagine the French horns down here. That's not gonna fly today. People were like, no, I want them now. So yeah, I mean, I've only written stuff on manuscript paper a handful of times in school. It was very aggressive because my penmanship, man, is not great. And I feel like it's getting worse,
Same.
Yeah. But earlier, Pete, you had mentioned about projects, kind of some stuff that's going on.
Yeah, let's do it.
Cool. So I already kind of talked about this Blitz project came out on Apple TV. Definitely a big career highlight for me is we just put out a show. It's a Zack Snyder show on Netflix called Twilight of the Gods. Pete's got it up right there, the link. And is this Norse mythology live action animation series. And Zach called Hans and said, hey, we could use your help with the music. And there's one thing everybody should know about Hans Zimmer is he does not know the word no. He says yes to everything, which is great because that means we always have stuff to do, right? And so he co-scored it with two very brilliant composers I've been working with for years, who both started off as his tech assistants and have since grown and written additional music on projects like Top Gun and Dune Part 1, Part 2. Stephen Doerr and Omer Benjamin, brilliant composers. And he said, hey, why don't the three of us just tag team this? And so they did. So we spent, most of this year just working on it. And typically for my job, the way it works is when Hans is really deeply involved in a project, he'll call me and my colleague and say, hey, we need these samples. We need these sounds. For example, this Apple TV one, he's like, we need the recorder. Can you make some stuff for it? We said, sure. But he actually didn't even ask me to jump on this. And I caught wind of it. I was getting coffee with Steven and he was telling me about it. So I had a meeting with Steven and Omer and Hans, and I was like, hey, do you guys need anything for this? And he's like, I don't know, not really. I mean, what do you have in mind? And I said, well, why don't we do some vocals? They said, okay. And I said, why don't you let me do some vocals? And they turned to me and said, I didn't know you can sing. And I said, I can't, but I know how to growl. And they said, okay, you're hired.
Norse mythology.
It's Norse mythology, right? And so that's how it started. And it ended up being one of those projects that we had full freedom to just do whatever we wanted. Every director is different with the way that they approach stuff. Especially directors, whether they have a music background or they don't, or who their influences are. Some are more hands-on than others, and some are a little bit more specific. Like, someone like Chris Nolan, very, very specific, very hands-on, very particular about his sounds. To him, the sounds that I have created for Hans, like, those are paramount to the entire score. So those sounds will never be used again. It's just for his projects. And then someone like Gore Verbinski, who's a guitarist, like, he'll come in and play on stuff as well. But the way that Zach had kind of said was Omer and Steve and Hans were just making these crazy sounds, and Hans and Zach just said, go nuts. And they presented them a couple of demos, and Zach and Debbie Snyder said, look, if you think you've gone weird, go weirder. And so that's when they called me, and I said, I can definitely make stuff go weird, So I ended up doing just hours worth of vocal work, grunts, chants. I created my own language for this project. A lot of it was rooted in Old Norse that I had, kind of studied and learned, but I'm not trying to appropriate that language. I don't need only old, like, Nordic ghosts haunting me in my life right now. I already got enough demons. I don't need some coming from Norway. But it's not really interesting if you're just pulling words that you don't really speak that well, like, and just putting them, like, I'm not going to go in there and be like Ragnarok, Valhalla. Like, that doesn't really mean anything. But the language itself, which you hear a lot of it influence, of course, in like Icelandic, and it's Germanic and all that stuff. It has such percussive elements to it that it's really, really, really fun. So I kind of came up with this color palette of these sounds and these textures that were both straight voice sounds, some that were whispers and some that were kind of like, like zombie guttural stuff. And through that, gave them to the composers, and they then kind of put them through the wash, mixed them up, and found a way to put them into the score. The entire score, with the exception of a couple of musicians that we used, was samples, with the exception of the musicians and then myself. I was the only live vocalist on this project. It was a time thing. It was a budget thing. But because of that, they kind of like used me to the full extent. So you watch the show, you hear the opening credits. That's me whispering to you. Anytime there's like a growl or a death breath or grumble, or, we even did some wolf howls, which was really fun. I know I'd sent you guys some links to that on my Instagram and stuff, which is pretty cool. But it was nice. It was the first time I got to kind of use my musicianship and really, put me into it. You spend 12 years creating sounds out of other people. You get quite curious to see if you can do it yourself. And it was fun. The double vinyl is out now. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah. So it was a career first. I went to school for piano. The most I ever did was sing in choir. And then here I'm building a choir literally out of my own voice. So I don't know. I kind of found a new thing. So now I'm just kind of like, anybody who needs kind of some random, creepy, weird textures or made up language, hit me up, man. Cause that's become my new thing.
That's an amazing concept, man. That is terrific and fascinating that you've come up with that. It's not lost on me that you're talking about the use of and the creation of sounds based on like guttural human verbal vocal noises. and there are baffles hanging up over a bed
Yeah.
behind you. Not sure what's going on there, but probably
I
something.
know.
Well, you know what's interesting is now, like, Norse mythology is really hot right now. It's in all the video games, cartoons, TV shows. And what's interesting, you're hearing a lot of these kind of like Norwegian rock bands and other people who are doing kind of more heavy rock inspired, using Old Norse as the language to perform, which is great. But for us, we're like, we got to make sure we're not following that trend. We always want to kind of like shift it a little bit, you know? And that's why, again, it wasn't a matter of taking the language and being specific to that, but rather, you know, just creating something kind of new, that still inherently feels like it could exist in this world. But there's no way of knowing. And we created something that's a weird blend of, you know, like there's a couple of gasps that I did on accident because I was literally running out of breath in my home studio. I was recording all these deep sounds, and at one part I just went, and I, you know, choked on my own breath, and I kept it because I was like, this sounds really funny, and I put it in there as a joke to the guys, and they ended up using that as one of the things in the music. But they found a way to take the comedy out of it and actually integrate it into the score, and make it kind of this really fun accented thing, blending it with everything else. So yeah, it's fun, man. I mean, I literally get to play and experiment for a living, and when you're working with people who are as collaborative as people in my studio, with some of the most interesting and inventive people that exist on this planet, I mean, we kind of just don't know when to stop, so we're just going to keep going and going and going. And yeah, it's been kind of a fun ride. So yeah, I hope you guys check out the show.
Yeah, before we started, we talked about how sometimes you leave nuggets behind and you don't realize that, you know, it's something that you just kind of blew off, and it ends up being something to somebody else that's, you know, that's useful. And it sounds like when you get to collaborate with people who are who feed off of your creativity, and you kind of go back and forth and create something that's not additive but multiplicative. You know, that's what you end up with, is that you can't throw anything away because you don't think it's right, because you just hand it over and then it becomes something.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
So what else? Let's go through what else you've been through, because in our catching up process, we didn't mention, I mean, you happened to name drop these films that you've worked on since the last time we talked, to include the Dune movies and Top Gun Maverick and all kinds of stuff that you've been busy with.
Yeah. Well, beyond stuff outside of what I've been doing with Hans, I actually, a couple years ago, I kind of launched a little side hustle. So I live in North Hollywood now, which is the land of the actors. So, and I got a lot of friends who are actors and you know, working on that. And because I've been doing voiceover for years, recording, as you guys know, with Rose Drive, that started as a passion project. And as I was recording and directing, getting more comfortable with that, I had some of my friends who were on the show that asked me, like, hey, have you ever cut demo reels together for actors? And I was like, no, I never have, but you know, I know the equipment enough, and you know, we can probably throw something together. They said, okay. So I started making demo reels for my friends. Aaron Cavett, who we've had on the show, plays Marcus in Rose Drive. I cut his first reel. Ryan Helquest, who you guys have also had on the show, also from Benicia, I cut together his reel. And this was years ago. So it was, you know, before COVID, just something I was doing kind of for fun. But down the line, I end up hearing they're signing with agencies and they're using those demo reels as an example, obviously, to show what they can do. I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. COVID hits. We start working from home. A couple years later, I start setting up my shop here in North Hollywood. And I said, you know, I think I want to get back into that, because why not throw more stuff on the plate, right?
Sure.
And I had probably like 6 or 7 of my friends here. I said, look, I'm trying to get together running the side business of cutting together voiceover reels for actors, because I really want to help out. And I'm looking around these studios all in Burbank. There's so many voiceover studio houses in Burbank. And they're expensive. They are extremely expensive. I understand why they are. They're running a business and they have top-notch people and this other stuff, but I'm like, if you're an actor, you're trying to get a voiceover reel, ain't no way you have $2,000 to drop on one reel, you know, like that's insane. Granted, I'm sure some of that comes with coaching and taking these intro classes and all that stuff. But if it really just comes down to making sure you have a highly polished, produced, you know, well-paced reel, I think I can handle that. So I asked my friends, like, can I use you guys as test subjects? So I cut together like 6 or 7 reels for free, some of my good friends, and they agreed, like, yeah, let me just put you on blast, and you know, and did that. And since then, I've kind of launched a full-scale business doing voiceover reels for actors, of all varying degrees of experience. You know, I have had actors who are very well established, who have continued to work full time in voiceover, but just needed an updated reel. I have people who have been acting on screen, but have never really done voiceover before. And then I have actors who are brand new to kind of all of it. And I try to guide them every which way that I can. I'm never going to turn anybody away, but I'm also not just going to be another jerk that like takes your money when you're not ready and you've never interacted with a microphone before, you know? So I like to be very specific with everybody to kind of figure out, hey, like, how long have you been doing this? How do you feel about your own voice? How do you connect with your voice? You know? And I don't know if I've ever talked about this on the show, but part of the reason this is such an important thing for me is I grew up with a very bad stutter, and I was in speech therapy all of elementary school. And, you know, it was very, very debilitating to me as a kid. And, you know, kids are kids and they're just going to talk shit, you know? So I definitely got made fun of quite a bit, which led me to not speak as much. And I was always quiet. And, you know, it's something that's a part of me. I'm definitely not ashamed of it. But because of it, I never understood the power of my own voice, just speaking. And turns out I have a quick little survey I ask everybody before I do their chat with them to see if they want to come and record with me. And I always ask them, was like, from a scale of 1 to 10, how do you feel about your own speaking voice? I have yet to have somebody to come back to me that says that they rate it above a 6. Everybody has their own personal issues with their voice. Mostly it's with people who have never interacted with the mic or kind of been in an environment where they can hear themselves and really kind of learn to appreciate it. And then when we start opening up and talking about it, it's because, you know, we hear our voice different than the way you guys hear it. You know, I hear it in my head and it's very smooth and sultry and very white. And then you guys hear it and I sound like Steve Urkel. And it's, you know, like, it's still beautiful, but like, that's how dramatic it can feel. So for me, it's really about creating an environment where people can feel really safe and comfortable, and we can just kind of play around and have fun. But it's become a really fun kind of side hustle. And, you know, I still haven't even put the website up. And every time I get a new actor, they post it, and I end up getting 3 or 4 people that hit me up that say, hey, we've heard, we want to see it. Like, we want to start doing some stuff with you. You know, and since then, a lot of people have told me they've been booking left and right with different agencies, commercials. You know, especially in a time for being a voice actor, it's pretty scary. You know, with, as we were talking about before, I don't want to get into that again, but the more we can have humans doing this, I think kind of the better. So I'm trying to eventually build a vocal production house that goes beyond just doing voiceover reels. I want to build podcast space for people. You know, I had a director come in who made a film. He's like, hey, some of our dialogue in the end of the scene kind of came up bad. Do you do ADR? And I'm like, I do now. So he came in and we did it, you know, do Foley, you know, like anything I can, especially things that involve the voice. I'm trying to build that out. And so far it's been going really well. So it's my passion project and I'm really enjoying it. And it's something that I feel I can directly help people, you know, and not charge them up the ass to where they're bankrupt and they can't pay their rent because of this one little audio clip that they're trying to come together. You know, and it helps because I have some friends that work in casting and who are casting agents. So they're keeping me in the loop as far as what people are looking for, the trends. And you know, I don't want to be approaching this in a way that was approached 20, 30 years ago. You know, now it's really all about that authenticity of your voice and having you at the forefront, and then the character kind of be wrapped around who you are as a voice artist. So
love it.
Sidebar, Pete, here's Raul's thought bubble from elementary school. Man, I've got this stutter. I guess I'm just going to have to get handsome if I'm going to get any of these chicks. So, you know, intrigued about this business of yours, though, because it sounds it sounds terrific. I am glad that you are helping your friends out and getting these reels done and finding a way to be more efficient and use your skills as a producer to help out. Talk us through the process. Let's say you have an actor who wants to do a voice reel. You start off by asking them what their connection is with their voice and how they rate themselves. But talk us through the process of creating a.
Sure. So, usually I like to do a Zoom consultation if I can. Look, ultimately I'm some random guy, regardless of if you know my background or not. I could just be another guy who's just trying to con you out of something, right? So I always like to connect with my artists because it is a very personal, kind of vulnerable thing to be in a space with just one other person and record their voice. So beyond asking the, usual things, what's your artistic background, all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. Why do you want to get a voiceover reel? I always kind of tell them the story of where I came from, at least as far as where I'm at currently in my job. So they know, like, I know my way around a microphone at least enough. But usually what I'll do is, let's just say they're like, cool, I want to jump on board. I want to make some reels. Then we kind of have to decide what reels they want to make. Because there used to be a time where you could have 3 minutes of a bunch of stuff all in one. Now casting wants you to have very specific reels, and there's so many different methods and types of voice acting that are available now. Growing up, it was Looney Tunes and the Jetsons and like all that, right? Those were the cartoons. They didn't have adult cartoons like we have now. They didn't have preschool cartoons like we have now. They didn't have young adult cartoons. They didn't have teen cartoons. These are all different subgenres that require just little tweaks here and there as far as the approach of voice acting goes, especially depending on what you're talking about. Something on Rick and Morty probably isn't going to be discussed in Dora the Explorer, hopefully. So, we'll go through that. And then also you have the video game world, which is massive with voiceover. And those require a very different approach. You have your Final Fantasy games, you have your open world video games like Elder Scrolls and Fallout. Those are very different types of voiceover acting as well. And then you have stuff like The Last of Us, which is grounded in realism. You have these cats in the mocap suit, and they are literally acting on screen. They're physically acting everything out. But that's a different type of writing for it. So I always try to give people a blend. They say, look, I want to do a commercial reel and I want to do an animation reel. I'm like, great. For the animation reel, let's blend some kid stuff, some adult stuff, and some video game stuff so that whoever's listening to this can imagine and visualize you in all these different kind of realms. And the idea is to have it less sound like a spitball of look at all these voices I can do, and rather make it feel like these are all actually pulled from pre-existing properties. Get the production and the writing decent enough to where it feels legit and it's not just you in front of a microphone and changing the music every 2 seconds. So sometimes I get a little wild with it. As you guys know, with Rose Drive, it's very sound design heavy. This gives me that opportunity to make a bunch of 5-10 second versions of Rose Drive. And the other service that I offer, because I am a writer, is I write all my characters. I write all the copy for my actors. Unless the actor's a writer themselves, they really want to just take the scripts and embody the characters themselves. So what I ask my actors, say, okay, you've agreed to do a reel with me. You want to do an animation reel and you want to do a commercial. For your animation reel, I want you to send me a list of all the characters. Think of what characters you like to play. Think of what movies you're watching, what cartoons you're watching, what books you're reading, what video games you're playing, what TikTok videos you're watching. Send me colors, send me vision boards, send me words, send me poetry, anything you have, so I can better understand you as a human. And once you send me all that information, I can pull from my catalog some characters that I think could fit for you, and also write brand new stuff that's going to be unique and specific to you. Because I think often one thing I hear that a lot of voice actors will do when they're putting together their own reels, and I understand it, because if you don't know, you don't know. They're kind of just mimicking a lot of stuff they're seeing, and they're pulling copy from they're like, oh, I do a really good Batman voice. Like, oh my God, I do a brain, and they're pulling those characters that are pre-existing. And, casting's not going to be impressive. Like, that's great. Everybody can do it. We already have our Batmans. We have our Banes, who are you? Who are you as an artist? I understand this archetype is what you're going for. Give me something fresh. Give me something new. Give me your perspective. So once they send me that, I can start drawing up the characters. And then what I do for the commercial, because even that's different. There's a big difference in commercials, uh, between selling a product from a third person perspective versus what we see now. We've all seen those Chase commercials and those Capital Ones commercials where it's a guy walking and he's talking to you like, hey, I'm just talking to my friend. And that's a very different approach than, now when you buy one cell phone from T-Mobile using our Magenta plan, we'll give you one on us, more savings, more cool stuff. You have that, but then you also have the ones from HelloFresh that are like, so I'm not a really good cook in the kitchen. In fact, I'm really bad. But with HelloFresh, everything's easy because the ingredients are laid out for me. All I have to do is take step 1, 2, 3, and then boom, we're all set. Now, where did I leave my kitchen knife? You have ones that are a little bit more grounded and more fun that way, and some that are just kind of conversational, that are just like, hey, if you need help, everybody goes through hard times, go to betterhelp.com. It's a great app to use, So finding all these different kind of techniques. And then of course now a lot of the salesmen that you're seeing on out there are TikTok influencers and stuff, right? They're kind of the marketing people that they're going for. So even that's a different approach as well. It's no longer really this approach of like, kind of that announcer voice and buy this product because it will blah, 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 blah. It's really about, just like we said before, keeping it really grounded and really emotional. So what I ask my actors to do for the commercial, I say, look, if you start booking things left and right, you're going to have to be selling a lot of shit that you don't believe in. That's part of your job as an actor. But for your reel, give me 6, 7, 10 things that you just use daily. We live in a world of marketing and advertisement. You guys look around your room right now, there are taglines everywhere. There's descriptions that you turn around. Honestly, go to your kitchen, look at your cereal boxes, and look how many pop-up words there are and how many tags there are. And I ask people, just send me things that you would talk about in general. If you're a musician, maybe it's a certain type of guitar or microphone that you like to use, or an app that you like to use. Why do you prefer Tidal over Apple Music or Spotify? And once you send me that list, I can start building custom copy meaning scripts specifically for you, so that when we're recording you actually have a personal connection to whatever that product is. And that way, when you have it out, you're having something that's completely different. I also don't like going the normal paths, like, oh, you're a female actor, so we have to do makeup and yoga pants. No, let's have you selling an Aston Martin and cliff diving, let's do something that's going to be different. That's not just putting you stuck in that box as well,
That's producing, man.
Yeah, I try to do that because it also makes the sessions more fun. They're supposed to be fun. Look, your voiceover reel, as I tell people, that's your vocal headshot, right? You're not going to be putting out headshots that are not you. You're going to dip into different characters, of course, but that's still you. Your voiceover reel should be the same way, So I really go deep in customizing everything for my actors, and when they come in, I'm always happy to direct. It's hard, especially during COVID. People want you to have your own microphone set up. Like, they want actors to do that. And I think that's an important skill set to know, right? I think no matter what it is you're doing, you should know the surrounding professions around you so that you can communicate and understand it. But some of these cats are like, you need to have this microphone and blah, blah, blah. They're on this tech. And I'm like, if you're an actor, that's not your skill set. Like, I get it. You're completely overwhelmed by not only recording yourself, but having to be your own engineer and all these other things. So for me, I'm like, just come in, be an artist. Let me do the rest for you. That's what I love to do. So after that, we'll come in. I always split up the sessions. We'll do the commercial reel one day. We'll do the animation different day, so you can be in different headspaces. We get to take as much time as we want. I'll cut them up. I'll edit them. I'll send samples along the way. My artists are actually usually pretty cool. It turns out, like, even the most, the ones who are the most like kind of controlling of their own stuff, they really like to have somebody else handle the order of things, which is good because it's a completely like objective point of view where we're always our own worst critic, and we're always going to like come in and be like, oh, I don't know about this. So I usually start by using my own best ear of judgment, say, cool, this take, we'll put all these out like this. I think this is flowing well. You tell me how you feel. And obviously always happy to readjust and change along the way. And then, yeah, I kind of send them on their way. And it's kind of one of those cool things because I don't even have a website yet, but I still keep getting flooded by people because people have incentive to post this, because nowadays people are finding finding artists through Instagram and TikTok. So people are posting their reels on there, and they just happen to tag me, and then people are like, "Oh my God, I didn't realize I needed one," or "This sounds so cool." And so it's fun. But ultimately, my whole mission is to just have fun and make sure that in this environment, especially if you're not super comfortable with it, it should be fun, and it should be stuff that you want to do and that we can, kind of just play around in, and yeah, I hope I can keep growing and expanding it as best I can. So that's it.
There you go. Everybody who wants it. Yeah, seriously, I want one.
Yeah, come on down, man. I'll record you. Got you, baby.
All right.
Yeah, this is great. What else do you want to get into, Jon?
I also just wanted to plug that we're going to do a Break It Down show series called Getting the Gig, and that one of our featured guests will be Raul, because he's got a great gig and he's created for himself several great gigs. And that's really the thrust of the show, is about musicians and creators not only securing and keeping great gigs, but creating great gigs for themselves. So look forward to that, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else you want to get into at all? Do you want to ask us any questions, Raul, before we wrap this up?
I don't know, man. I mean, all the questions I want to ask is going to take this like 5 hours long, because I haven't talked to you guys in so long, man.
It has been a minute.
Yeah.
Well, we should just get together offline and have coffee or dinner or something. I'll come up to you.
Yeah, no, man, that'd be great. It's been quite some time, and I still don't even head back to our hometown that often. I'm not going to be going up this year for Christmas. I usually go back up to Benicia every year for Christmas, but it just gets a little harder, especially now that I've kind of operating on all cylinders. But
yeah, you have a great operation.
I'm trying, man. Yeah, I'm just trying to be busy. It's good to be busy. Yeah, I completely agree. So I'm just honestly, I'm grateful you guys still even check in from time to time, and I don't know. I feel like as long as you guys keep doing the show and you keep wanting me, I want to keep coming back, because it's really cool. I had one of my cousins last year ask me, she goes, "Hey, I've been trying to find all your interviews, because I just want to like show my kids, and so they can see what their uncle's been up to like over these years, now that they're getting a little bit older." And she was like, "What was your first show?" And I was like, Break It Down show. And it was cool, man. I got to revisit that a little bit. I don't know how often you guys are going back to listening to your own shows, but it was a trip of just listening to how I was speaking then, and like just how much, I don't mean this as a toot in my own horn, because I think this is true for everybody, just like hearing the growth of me being more comfortable in myself. And I have some friends right now who are doing some pretty amazing things. And just like me, like when you guys first met me, I was kind of more like, "Hey guys, yeah, thanks for having me." and I had to
you've grown.
I try, man, but it's because of opportunities like this, and you guys were always so just cool and easy to talk to, and I never felt like any sort of pressure, and it just felt like the second I met y'all, I was like, "Oh, I'm just catching up with my old buddies, that I've known for years." So I just want to give you guys a shout out for always creating like the best environment that I get to be in, and everybody else. I mean, that's why you guys get everybody. You guys have had some masters on your show, because people love you, and I think that's cool. That's what it should be, So yeah.
I love it. All right, I'm going to roll these credits. I'll come right back to you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.